Hey everybody, I'm Chris, and we're getting kind of down to it. NFL season's right around the corner, and that means fantasy drafts have to finish pretty soon. If you were wise in your league and you waited for the Labor Day weekend-ish draft time, it's time to start thinking about who you're going to take. And you've seen lots of sleeper lists. You've seen lots of bust lists. In fact, we've done those on this channel. But how about just some great big names that I have not taken? I do a lot of drafts, and we're going to show you guys that I flat out have not taken on any teams. These guys pretty much are stay away from me. If you've been watching the channel or listening to the podcast, you're not surprised. Austin Ekeler is prime on my big names to avoid list. We're watching him destroy his hamstring for 2 months last year. And in a standard league, Ekeler's going 13th or 14th overall. For me, that's a no. All anybody wants to tell you about Ekeler is, oh man, if you project those first 3 weeks before he did get hurt last year, he'd have gotten 1,700 scrimmage yards. But here's the thing, Ekeler did come back and play more games starting in week 12, and you saw an awful lot of this. Folks, we call this ho-hum. Ekeler can be a home run hitter, but he also does this. About half his carries after he returned from injury last year went for 2 yards or fewer. Now, I get it. The dream of anyone taking Ekeler is plays like this, the bunny reception with the convoy. Hey, did you know new offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi comes from New Orleans and helped make Alvin Kamara a star? This just in. You can't just make someone a star. Alvin Kamara's really, really good. He is a star. At his best, Ekeler can take advantage of a hole, cut it back hard. There's no arguing about Ekeler's shiftiness, and he'll accelerate into the clear, though you'll see, sometimes he does get run down from behind. I think of him as a sprinter, but he doesn't actually often break big runs. 2019, he did break a few long catches. And it's also hard to argue that Ekeler has the power to score all that often from inside the 5. And again, people are going to say, well, Alvin Kamara, he catches passes inside the 5. And all I can tell you is, yeah, Ekeler's good. He's not as good as Kamara, and I'm not sure that Joe Lombardi will have Austin Ekeler on his fantasy team. In a full PPR league, which I don't really advocate, I can get Ekeler as high as 16th overall. He's going 13th in standard. I can't get behind it. I think people are rooting for laundry. I think they're seeing a hole in the Chargers' backfield, and they're just assuming Ekeler is going to have a Kamara-sized workload, and it's a good opportunity, and I'm not saying he's a terrible player. I don't think the skills warrant the kind of investment that people are making, and for me, he would be a stay away. He's a great story. He's fun to root for. He went to Western Colorado. It's a self-made guy. I don't want to dislike Austin Ekeler at all. I just haven't drafted him at all. All right, next up, Dak Prescott. Prescott's top-line numbers, listen, he has a lot of fans in fantasy football. These stats paint the picture of a guy at the top of his craft, and I just don't think the tape quite bears that out. Even before we get to that, though, one reason not to be interested in Dak's price this year is you're paying top 5 quarterback prices, 5th round in most drafts, where you're drafting a single quarterback, and nobody knows how his shoulder is going to hold up in 2021. Dak probably doesn't even know. We're hoping it's nothing. He's missed basically all of training camp. He started throwing again. I'm not dinging his rank because of a shoulder injury that we don't know is a real thing, but I think it is a risk factor, right? One thing I'll say about Prescott before he broke his leg in 2020, sure, the numbers were huge. Everyone dreams of those crazy stats. Another guy wow, he was on pace for over 6,000 yards passing, which is technically true, but probably was never going to happen. When the quarterback himself is helping digging the scoreboard hole, then throwing like a madman to get out of that hole, I think we call that doing the Bortles. It usually doesn't last. I'm not blaming him for Myles Garrett beating his left tackle here, but Dak is pretty casual and waits a pretty long time before the fumble. And then at the end of the frantic, doomed comeback in that game, we've gotten all sorts of empty calorie yards yet again for the 3rd straight week. You get this. And listen, Dak is a good player. I'm not trying to tell you that Dak Prescott is Blake Bortles. He's much better. But what you're looking at here is Bortles' huge fantasy season in which the Jaguars stunk and Bortles kept throwing from behind and wound up producing the overall QB4 season. And these are the numbers that Bortles and Prescott produced on plays when their teams had dug a hole and were losing by double-digit points on the scoreboard. And I'm sorry, For as much as we sort of mock Bortles for what he did playing from behind 6 years ago, Prescott's supposedly monster September was even more suspicious than Bortles' 2015 act. Prescott's pretty good, but I don't think he's an elite deep thrower, and his shoulder hurts. And a lot of his big numbers happened last year because his team really needed to throw from way behind, which is very hard to predict from year to year, despite the fact that people seem to think they can. I'm not taking Dak Prescott inside the top 5 quarterbacks this year. Hey, I want to thank Viori Clothing for sponsoring today's show. I have some Viori shorts. I have a long sleeve tee. Their clothes are great for workout. They're also great for like lazy Sunday football watching. What's amazing about Viori is by next year, their clothing will be made with 80% recycled material. Now, I'm glad I'm not in the clothing business because I do not understand how it's possible that like 4 or 5 recycled bottles can turn into the softest pair of shorts I've ever owned. But it does, in fact, happen. They're a good company. Their heart is in the right place, trying to make the world a better place. And plus, the clothes are really incredible. Read their story at vioriclothing.com/Harris. If you add the /Harris on there and you decide to get something, you'll get 20% off your first purchase. I love these clothes. I really do. For 20% off, vioriclothing.com/Harris. Okay, we're back and we're talking about big names to avoid in your fantasy draft for 2021. And this one breaks my heart a little. I don't like saying it, but it's Jonathan Taylor. I'm a pretty big Jonathan Taylor fan, so when I say don't draft him, I'm saying don't draft him at his price. I would love to wind up with him on a dynasty team. I think he's got Nick Chubb qualities, maybe not quite that good, but I was a big fan last year, and he really came around as the season wore on. From early November to the end of the season, he finished really high, obvious top 5 fantasy performance among running backs, and submitted very solid, powerful tape. Is he a cut on a dime guy? No. Is he uncatchably fast? He's pretty fast for his size, but no, he's pretty good at these things. But he is a power back. He is a big dude. But I gotta spend a first-round pick and hope this guy makes the Colts offense great. Carson Wentz? Especially when Wentz didn't have a training camp with his new team since he fractured his foot, and when the starting guard, Quentin Nelson, also had foot surgery. A first-round pick? Man, as much as I like Taylor, I watch plays like these from Wentz, and I see so much that can go wrong. And I grant you, the Colts offensive line, last time we saw it, was a lot better than the Eagles' injured offensive line last year. But I hasten to add, Wentz has never played with his new team. Again, this chart is me not telling you that I think Jonathan Taylor is bad. He's good. He's a big dude with fine long speed, non-terrible agility, brings the hammer in short yardage. But please let's not look at 2020 like he was some undeniable force the whole year. People were angry with him for 2.5 months of his rookie season, right? 253 of those rushing yards happened in Week 17 against a desperately tanking for Trevor Jaguars squad after all of our fantasy playoffs were over. Taylor really isn't, as much as I like him, one of the truly great running backs in the league, not from what I've seen so far. And I hate to determine these things by talking about situation, but in the first round, I'm going to take a guy I'm not terrified of his quarterback. And lastly, while I don't mean to be critical, I can truthfully say I have 0 fantasy teams with Calvin Ridley on them. And it's also really not because Ridley is particularly bad or anything, but rather also because of where he gets drafted. These plays from 2020, these are very good plays we're going to show you. Just look at the release. We'll wind it back. Ridley's quick. He's a handful with his releases and his breaks in and out of routes. Here he's slot right. Tampa will try and play press man and bump. Look at how quick he gets off the line. Look at how fast. Surprising the defender immediately ahead of the corner. So the guy is trailing. And then when Ridley makes the hard cut to the center of the field, he's absolutely wide open. I don't have a lot, he's not Julio Jones, but he is very, very good, and I do not have a lot of complaints about Ridley, the player. He's my number 6 wideout. He's the consensus number 6 wideout as well. The problem for me is there's kind of a gap between the top 5 receivers. Adams, Hill, Diggs, Hopkins, Metcalf, and then everyone else. To me, there kind of isn't a number 6, right? And so when it comes time where you got to consider Ridley late in second rounds in fantasy drafts, I'm seeing those vaguely trustable running backs running out real quick, and I just wind up taking one of them. So Taylor, we're seeing here, he's never there, obviously. We said that earlier. But if it's a Mixon, if it's Jacobs, which I'm a little higher on than a lot of people, if it's Antonio Gibson, I wind up with a bunch in that neighborhood. Najee Harris, usually not there either. These are my ranks. But in this range, it does always tend to be either one of those running backs or else a Kittle or a Waller, and I tend not to get Ridley. Again, I'm not criticizing who he is as a player. Well, and if there's one little criticism, maybe it's not about him. The little thing that worries me that I talk about sometimes on the podcast, it's Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has presided over some very good offenses, and it's not like I'm very selectively showing you plays here. It's not like he never takes shots. He does. But I do feel like as the years have gone by, as someone who has had Julio Jones and Ridley on teams a lot, it never fails to frustrate me that when I watch Falcons film, Ryan just seems to come so fast off of his primary downfield reads more and more. I'm not calling him a total captain check down, and there are a lot worse quarterbacks that Calvin Ridley could have, but I see it enough these days to use it as a tiebreaker against the Falcon weapons. Ridley is a wide receiver one for fantasy. There's no argument there. But he doesn't wind up on any of my teams. So those are some big names to avoid on my list, but who are the big names to avoid on your list? I want to hear them down in the comments. I'll take a look. We'll all see the bigger names that you're just not interested in having for fantasy this year. We'll all evaluate, leave some comments, leave some likes, and we'll see what we think of your do not draft list. I want you to be a little bit nervous for your drafts, but not that nervous. You're prepared. You've been watching the channel. I think you can do it. And you know what? Once you're done, we'll meet back here all season and talk about what we see in 2021. Thanks for watching. Thanks so much for watching. Please, please, please smash that like button. Write a comment. Tell us who else you'd like to see us review film on. And of course, best of all, please subscribe to our channel and then click that little bell above the subscribe button and you'll be notified whenever we post a new video.